Good afternoon, Senators. My name is Jenni Benson, Jennibenson. I serve as the president of the Nebraska State Education Association, and I'm here representing NSEA's 28,000 members, teachers, education support professionals in Nebraska. I want to thank Senator Wayne for introducing this legislation to assess and treat post-traumatic stress disorder. I have 30 plus years as a special education teacher. I know that students come to school with high levels of trauma and have more difficult time learning, socializing, enjoying school as a whole. I believe it's important we have programs such as this pilot for this legislation that we can assess and treat childhood trauma from violence, abandonment, psychological, physical abuse, and the trauma that children deal with due to hunger, neglect, or any kind of family situation. As I listen to the other testifiers, I am sure as you do in your own, when you hear these stories, you think of people that you know. And I think of my students. I think of my grandchildren who were adopted out of foster care at 9 years old. They are now 19 years old. I think of myself as a survivor of childhood trauma. And what I'm hearing as we're talking about this, and as a teacher for all these years, is what I'm hearing is it doesn't just affect the person, it affects the family, it affects being able to go to school, it affects my grandkids on a daily basis. And I will tell you that myself and my grandkids have had therapy every week since they came into our home. But the trauma and the physical things that the one gentleman we're talking about, the change in their personalities and their changes as young children going through trauma. I wanted to tell one story about a student I had who was a first grader. So he was already receiving special education services from me. He came to school one day and he just seemed sad. And I said to him, well, what's going on today? He said, my mom stabbed my dad last night, and this is the only place I could come today, so they brought me to school. And that as a teacher causes trauma as well, because you're dealing with students who are going through this and you're going through it with them. And unfortunately, in schools and in communities, we look at things in silos instead of looking at them as an overall service model that we need for our families. We're very judgmental about families. We're very judgmental about where they're coming from and what they're dealing with. And as this young man came to me as a first grader, and school was his safety net, but then he didn't have a family to go home because his father was dead and his mother was now in prison. And then he went into the foster care system. And I often think of him and I don't know where he's at. I look up some of my other kids that I've had, and ones I taught in Austin, Texas in my first year. I look them up because I can find them on social media because they had very unique names. But other kids, I don't know what happened to them. But I know it's happening with my grandchildren at 19. I see it every day. I know what I deal with myself from the things that have happened. And I just ask you, when you're listening to these stories, to really put a human face on the things we're talking about, because these are happening daily to our children, and our children should be our most important priority in everything we do in this legislature. Thank you.